Why did every conversation stop the moment she walked through the gate? The desert air was thick with dust and the stale scent of diesel. Forward operating base Kestrel sat like a scar across the endless plains, rows of sandbags, drooping camo nets, and faces that had forgotten softness. The kind of place where silence had a sound of its own, and into that silence she arrived. Yep. 52 years old. Compact, steady eyes like washed steel, too calm for a. She walked through the corridor of stacked barriers with quiet precision, her steps deliberate, her posture upright against the wind. A light pack on her shoulder, a hardened rifle case in her hand. No fanfare, no introduction, just presence, the kind that drew attention without asking for it. Men paused mid-motion, maintenance stopped, laughter dimmed. A dozen faces watched her, trying to decide what she was: outsider, analyst, burden. "Who's the tourist?" one soldier muttered. "Intel says she's a consultant," another replied, smirking. "A consultant," Lieutenant's voice carried, sharp with arrogance. "They send us a librarian to hunt wolves." His words lingered in the heat like shrapnel. Was young, molded by theory, sharpened by simulation, but still green enough to believe confidence was competence. His platoon sergeant, older and broader, grunted in agreement. "Probably here to brief us on cultural sensitivity," before catching a chopper back to the hotel. A ripple of low laughter followed. Heard at every syllable, she didn't respond. She never wasted motion or words. The command tent waited ahead, its canvas edges snapping in the dry wind. Inside, the air was cool and dim, thick with the hum of generators. Colonel sat behind a folding table cluttered with maps and half-dead laptops. His face was drawn, eyes sunk deep from too many years at war. He looked up as she entered, reading her file or what was left of it. A name, an age, one line: external advisor, tactical overwatch. The rest was redacted. A signature at the bottom caught his eye, a general's name he hadn't seen in a decade. "Miss," he said flatly. He didn't stand, didn't offer a chair. "Welcome to Kestrel. Your clearance is your purpose." Less so. "My purpose," she said quietly, "is to provide support as needed, Colonel." Her voice carried something the file didn't. Wait. Not the kind that comes from authority, but from knowing exactly how little it means. And stood nearby, their presence a silent judgment. The lieutenant stepped forward, crossing his arms. "The support we need is kinetic, ma'am," he said, the word ma'am sharp with condescension. "We need trigger pullers, not policy analysts." Turned to him. For a heartbeat their eyes met, hers a flat, unreadable gray that didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He felt something flicker behind his chest. Discomfort. The first crack in his certainty. "I understand," she said simply. Colonel sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Sergeant, find her a bunk in the annex. Get her squared away." His tone was dismissal, final and cold. "And miss," he added without looking up, "try to stay out of the way. The men have work to do." "Understood." Outside, the sun hit her like a blow. Led her toward a row of rusting shipping containers turned into barracks. His tone was formally polite, but his pace was fast, like he couldn't wait to be rid of her. "Annex is this way, ma'am." Inside the cramped metal box that would be her quarters, she unpacked methodically. No wasted motion. A spare set of fatigues, a data slate, a small med kit, and then the rifle case. She opened it with care. The weapon inside wasn't new. It wasn't sleek or digital. It was a relic, a heavily modified bolt-action rifle, its wooden stock worn smooth from use, its receiver bearing the soft patina of time. But it was clean, immaculate, maintained like a sacred instrument. She began to clean it again anyway, each movement deliberate, almost reverent. It was ritual not for the weapon but for herself. Outside, and Private lingered. He caught a glimpse of the rifle through the open door and scoffed. "Get a load of this." "Grandpa's hunting rifle," said, loud enough for her to hear. Laughed. "She's probably one of those wannabe legends. You know, Ghost Viper or something." The name drifted into the air like smoke. Ghost Viper. A myth the phantom sniper from the Gray Valley War. 200 confirmed kills. Vanished a decade ago. No one ever proved she was real. Grinned at his own joke. Chuckled too. And inside the container slid the bolt back into place. The metallic click echoed, cold, final. That was her answer. Her silence spoke in a language they didn't yet understand. Morning came hard and dry, the kind of dawn that made everything look brittle, even the air. The base stirred as the colonel's voice called a briefing. Men gathered around the map table, dust streaking their fatigues, the smell of burnt coffee hanging heavy. The mission was clear. A high-value target, an insurgent commander known only as the Architect, was rumored to be meeting his lieutenants in the foothills. Viper team will move in, confirm presence, and paint the target force, said, tapping the satellite map. No engagement unless compromised. In and out, clean and quiet. His chest swelled with pride. We'll get it done, sir. The team nodded, disciplined and eager. They lived for this, the hunt. At the back of the tent, unnoticed at first, stood. She hadn't been invited, but no one had told her to leave either. His jaw tightened when he saw her. "Ms.," he said, loud enough for the room to hear, "your role in this operation will be to remain here at the fob. You'll be assigned to the comms tent to monitor the feeds." It wasn't a request. It was exile disguised as duty. Smirked openly. Gave a quiet, mocking shake of the head. "Understood, Colonel," said evenly. The words were nothing. The silence that followed them was everything. By noon, she sat in the comms tent, a dim, humming room filled with blinking lights and soft voices. The young sergeant in charge, Elias Vance, offered her a polite nod, gesturing to a spare chair. "Colonel said you'd be joining us, ma'am. Main tactical feed, on that screen there. Let me know if you need anything." He said it like one says, "Please, don't touch anything." She didn't. For hours she sat there, still, unreadable. She didn't move, didn't ask questions, didn't comment, just watched, listened, absorbed. One by one, Viper team's icons appeared on the digital map as they airlifted toward their drop zone. "Viper 1, Kestrel Command," came the voice on comms. "Copy, Command," replied. "In position, no activity to report." It was clean, routine, predictable. Then leaned forward. Her eyes narrowed at one of the side monitors, a screen showing a waterfall display of radio frequencies. Most wouldn't have noticed, but she did. A flicker. A pattern out of place. Noise that wasn't noise. The faint hum of something foreign hiding beneath the baseline static, too precise, too rhythmic. A whisper in the dark. She said nothing, she kept watching. When it came fast. A burst of static slammed through the comms, wiping out every channel at once. The digital map blinked red, then gray. "Viper 1, this is Kestrel Command, radio check over." Only silence answered. "Try secondary," barked. "Negative, sir, spectrum's jammed," Vance said, panic rising. "Tertiary's dead too, full spectrum interference. This isn't local chatter, it's military grade." Inside the tent, order dissolved into motion. "Get visuals up, launch the drone." Drone feeds cut, links dead. They were blind, deaf, helpless. 12 men, cut off deep in enemy territory. Colonel's jaw clenched. He knew, he muttered. The Architect knew. The tent went still. The realization was ice. They walked into a trap. And then quiet again, but not peace, the kind of quiet that presses down on lungs and hearts alike. Stood. Her voice sliced through the room, calm, controlled. "Get me a portable SATCOM and a high-power spotter scope." Every head turned. Vance blinked. "Ma'am, that won't help the jamming." "It's not a solid wall," she interrupted, eyes fixed on the frequency screen. "It's cycling. Microsecond gaps in the waveform. You're too slow to catch them." She paused. "I'm not." The room froze, unsure whether to believe her or not, hesitated, then snapped, "Give her what she needs." She moved like a storm, purposeful, efficient, no wasted effort. She grabbed the gear, slung the heavy SATCOM unit over her shoulder, and stepped out into the brutal sunlight. No one spoke as she walked toward the perimeter tower, the tallest structure in the base, a rickety skeleton of steel. Soldiers stared. No one stopped her. She began to climb. Wind tore at her clothes, dust biting her face, but she never looked down. She moved with the rhythm of someone who'd done this too many times to count. At the top, the platform swayed. She didn't notice. She connected her SATCOM, plugged into the raw antenna feed, and closed her eyes. Static, noise, chaos, and beneath it, pattern. She listened. Then her hand moved, adjusting the dial, shifting the angle. Her other hand steadied the scope, eyes narrowing across miles of haze. The world dissolved into details. Dust that shouldn't rise there, a glint that betrayed glass, the faint echo of machine gun bursts and mortar coughs carried on the wind. She could see it, the battle unfolding beyond the ridge, invisible to everyone else. Her voice dropped to a whisper only the wind could hear. "Hold on, boys." Down below, the comms tent buzzed with confusion. "What the hell is she doing?" someone whispered. Didn't answer. He was watching through binoculars, a lone figure against the sky, motionless except for small adjustments. The base's laughter, the doubts, the sneers, all of it was gone now, replaced by something else. Something colder. Something beginning to understand. What does a ghost sound like when it speaks through static? Up in the observation tower, the wind howled through the steel frame, each gust moaning like a warning. But she didn't flinch. Her focus was absolute. Gloved fingers moved in slow, deliberate rhythm across the comms controls, tuning, scanning, hunting. She filtered the noise like a surgeon carving through chaos. Her pulse barely moved. Down below, the base was in controlled panic. Colonel's voice cut through the chatter. "I want those channels back now. I don't care how." Vance, the young comm tech, was drenched in sweat. "Sir, it's no use. The signal is piggybacking off our own frequency. It's folding the spectrum. Whoever's behind this isn't some warlord with a radio shack. This is military engineering." His jaw tightened. "The architect," he muttered. "He's got backing." He turned to glance outside at the faint figure atop the tower. She looked so small up there, a solitary silhouette against the burning sky, but something in the way she stood made him hesitate. There was no fear, only control. "What is she doing?" Vance asked. Didn't answer, he didn't know. Exhaled slowly, steadying her scope. Through the glass, the distant ridge shimmered with heat, but beneath that mirage, her mind built a map. Every echo, every glint, every tremor of movement translated into distance, elevation, probability. Her ear caught the subtle difference between a ricochet and a reload. She wasn't listening to sound. She was reading intention. Then she saw it. A flash, tiny, sharp, deliberate. A reflection off metal too clean to be random. A sniper's nest. She adjusted her focus slightly, catching the faint dust puff of a high-caliber muzzle blast. She whispered under her breath, "Got you." Her left hand danced over the SATCOM keypad. To anyone else, it would look like nonsense, random characters, sent in blindingly fast bursts. But each was a micro-packet of data, timed to slip through the millisecond openings in the jamming wave. The message was small, surgical. "MG nest, 30 meters up, 200, cave mouth." 5 miles away, his world was collapsing. Machine gun fire raked the rocks above him, each burst spraying stone and dirt into his face. We're pinned," shouted. His reply was a curse, drowned by gunfire. They were boxed in, a perfect ambush, every route of retreat covered, the comms dead. The architect had known their exact entry point. It was impossible. "Pull back," yelled, clutching his bleeding arm. Pull back to where, barked, we're surrounded. The sound of another round cracked from the ridge. One of his men went still. Ducked behind cover, heart pounding, mind racing. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping terror, the kind that stripped everything down to instinct. Then a vibration on his wrist. His tactical wrist pad flickered to life. A message. Just one line of text. MG Nest 30 MUP200 Cave Mouth. He blinked. Sir, look, he showed the pad. What the hell is that? I don't know, but it's coming from our emergency beacon. That beacon's dead. Then someone's talking through the dead. They didn't have time to argue, made a call. Jones, suppress that cave now. The two soldiers turned their rifles skyward and unleashed controlled fire at the rock face indicated in the message. Seconds later, the heavy machine gun above them sputtered, then went silent. The valley exhaled. For the first time in hours, there was a pause. His eyes widened. No way. Then another vibration on his wrist. Sniper, ruined hut 1100, upper window. Didn't hesitate. Grenadier, window 11 o'clock. A thump. The grenade's arc traced clean across the ridge, a single explosion, sharp and final. The sniper fire stopped. What, who's sending this? Asked, voice shaking. Didn't answer. He just looked up toward the sky, toward the direction of Fob Kestrel miles away, beyond the haze. Someone was watching them. In the tower's movements were fluid now. Her fingers typed at a pace that no modern comms operator could sustain. She didn't need automation. She was the automation. Each pulse she sent was a whisper through the storm, each one slipping perfectly between the folds of interference. Her messages came in patterns, short, cold. Mortar team, south gully, behind rocks. 3-man flank, west low ground. Infantry cluster, Wadi, 200 m south. She was orchestrating a battle she couldn't see, but could feel. From the faint echo of distant shots. From the dust that rose too late. From instinct that had never dulled. The soldiers at the FOB watched the feed in stunned silence. On their spectrum analysis display, they saw her data bursts, thin, invisible threads cutting through the static. Sir, Vance whispered, how is she doing that? No system could sync to that level of precision. She's not a system, said quietly. He lowered his binoculars, watching her stand alone at the top of the tower. She's something else. On the ridge, Viper team began to move. They weren't just surviving now. They were counterattacking, guided by invisible eyes. Shouted orders with renewed clarity. Flank left, take the low ground. You shift fire to the gully. Every move they made matched ghost signals perfectly. Enemy mortar team eliminated. Sniper neutralized. Ambushers outflanked. It was as if the battlefield itself was speaking through them. But's mind was spinning. Who could even do this? The messages came faster than any relay, more accurate than satellite. There was no delay, no lag. Whoever it was wasn't guessing. They knew. A final message pulsed through his wrist pad. Withdraw 280 degrees, 300 meters, ridge saddle clear. Trusted it without hesitation. Move that way, go. The team moved as one, cutting through the rocks toward the escape route. Bullets still snapped past them, but the intensity was breaking. The enemy, once perfectly coordinated, was falling apart, confused, disoriented. They didn't understand how their ambush had turned into slaughter. His men reached the saddle, panting, dragging the wounded. He turned back, seeing the valley where death had waited for them, now silent, smoke rising. They made it out alive, barely. He didn't smile, he didn't even breathe. He just whispered, whoever you are, thank you. At the base, the room erupted in life as comms reconnected, faint, broken but real. Kestrel Command's voice came through, breathless and raw. We're holding. Ambush broken, 2 down, request over. The tension snapped like a taut wire finally cut. Vance nearly collapsed with relief. Colonel's knuckles went white as he grabbed the mic. Solid copy, Viper 1, hold position. QRF's airborne, 2 minutes out. He turned to Vance. Get the hellos up now, tell them we've got coordinates. As the quick reaction force roared to life, his gaze drifted again to the tower. The sun was bleeding into dusk, painting the steel skeleton red. And up there, still unmoving, was eyes pressed to her scope, hair whipping in the wind. She just saved 12 men, Vance said quietly. Didn't reply, he just whispered to himself, no, she saved all of us. When the helicopters thundered back an hour later, they brought survivors burned, bloodied but alive. Viper team staggered out, dazed, stunned into silence. The air reeked of cordite and disbelief. The medics rushed forward, followed. Sat on the ground beside the stretcher bearing, both of them staring at each other as if trying to confirm that the other was real. Lips trembled. Someone was feeding us intel, perfect intel, every move, every angle. Swallowed, it wasn't command, it was something else. Sir, the comm tech Vance said, jogging up with his tablet. We tracked the transmission logs. The messages came from inside the base. From where? Asked. Observation Tower 3, sir. Same channel as the ghost feed. Froze. Went still. There was only one person up there. Minutes later, the tower door creaked open. Was coming down, slowly, calmly. The last light of dusk carved gold across her face. She carried the SATCOM unit slung over her shoulder, the scope tucked beneath her arm as if nothing extraordinary had happened. She reached the ground, boots settling in the dust, her face unreadable. Soldiers watched her pass, the same men who'd laughed that morning. Not one spoke. She returned to the comms tent, unplugged the battered unit and began packing it away. No fanfare, no explanation, just quiet efficiency. The door flap rustled. Colonel stepped in, followed by in. They stopped a few feet from her. Miss, said voice tight, formal, I need to know who you are. She didn't look up. I told you, Colonel, tactical overwatch. He took a step closer. That's not good enough. Those signals came from you. You broke through military-grade jamming with obsolete equipment. That's not possible. Finally she looked at him, the same pale gray eyes, calm, still. Then maybe I'm not supposed to be possible. Stepped forward, his voice a low growl of disbelief and awe. The messages, they were tagged GV. What does that mean? Answered before she could speak. His voice was barely a whisper. Ghost Viper. The word fell heavy, like a verdict. Stared, expression froze. And said nothing. She set her gear aside, then slowly rolled up the sleeve of her fatigues. The skin beneath was sun-browned and marked by an old, faded tattoo. A coiled viper, its fangs bared, its tail dissolving into smoke. The symbol of Task Force 11. The ghost that never existed. The silence that followed was total. All stood still, their disbelief collapsing into awe. The myth was real. The woman they had dismissed, mocked, sidelined, had saved them all. Her sleeve fell back into place. She met their eyes, one by one, and said softly, almost kindly, Your men fought well, you should be proud. Then she turned, picked up her rifle case, and walked out into the cooling desert air, leaving behind a room full of men who finally understood how small they'd been. The myth of Ghost Viper wasn't reborn that night. It had never died. And for the first time, the men of Kestrel understood why ghosts never speak, because their silence says everything. How does a myth breathe when it realizes it's still alive? The camp had changed overnight. It wasn't visible at first glance. The barriers still sagged under the same desert wind. The camouflage netting still fluttered like torn fabric over old wounds, but the sound had changed. Silence had gained weight. Men who once laughed too loud now lowered their voices when she passed. Conversations paused mid-sentence. The clang of tools, the whir of generators, all seemed to soften around her. The base had adjusted itself, unconsciously, to her gravity. Walked through it as though unaware. She carried no authority on paper, but no one stood in her way anymore. Even the man who had once sneered at her now stepped aside without a word when she entered the command tent. The hierarchy hadn't changed officially, but in truth, it had been rewritten in one silent evening. The whispers spread fast, as they always do in places where death is a daily visitor. Did you hear? The consultant, she's Ghost Viper. That's impossible, man. Ghost Viper died in Gray Valley. Then tell me how she broke a full-spectrum lockout with a field satcom from the 90s. She didn't break it, she walked through it. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was reverence dressed as rumor. Inside the mess hall, young privates who'd mocked her name the day before now stared at their trays in silence when she sat at the far table. The older ones, those who had survived enough to sense true danger, kept their distance for another reason. Not fear, respect, the kind that makes space for ghosts. Was one of them. His arm was still bandaged, his movements slower, the pain a constant echo of that day. But his eyes were sharper now, clearer. The kind of clarity that only humility brings. He watched her as she ate alone, unhurried, quiet, every gesture efficient, unpretentious. He remembered the cruel joke he'd made. Bet she tells people she's Ghost Viper. It replayed in his head like a confession that couldn't be taken back. He set down his fork and stood. Sitting across from him, caught the movement. You're really gonna do it? Nodded, someone should. He crossed the room slowly, boots echoing against the steel floor. Didn't look up until his shadow crossed her tray. Ma'am, he said quietly. Her gaze lifted, calm, expectant. I owe you an apology, he began. His voice wavered once, then steadied. For the things I said, for the way we treated you, I should known better. There was no pity in her eyes, no condescension, only stillness. You couldn't have known, she said. You weren't supposed to. That confused him. Supposed to. She looked down at her tray, then back at him. Legends only work when they're forgotten, Sergeant. If people remember, they stop learning. If they forget, they start watching again. He didn't understand, not completely, but the words stayed with him. When he returned to his seat, didn't speak. Neither did, but both men felt the same thing pressing on their chests, the kind of guilt that doesn't demand punishment, only change. Later that evening, the base was painted in the colors of exhaustion. The generators hummed their endless mechanical lullaby, and a tired orange glow leaked from the tents like tired lanterns. Colonel sat in his quarters, the map of the range still spread before him. He'd marked every coordinate from the ambush, every point where Viper team had almost died, and every enemy position had called out. The data was flawless, not a single correction, not one. He stared at it for a long time before speaking. She's not human, he muttered. She's better, Vance said softly from across the table. The young comm-tech looked uneasy, his hands still fidgeting with the unplugged headset he'd been wearing when it happened. Sir, I saw her packet timing. No one could do that manually. I ran a check on the signal. She sent 200 bursts, perfectly spaced. No machine could predict the harmonics like that. Leaned back in his chair, the creak of metal loud in the small space. She's not one of ours anymore, Sergeant. She's one of something else. Vance hesitated, then why send her here? The colonel didn't answer immediately. He looked at the faded signature on her file, the name of a general long retired, maybe dead. Maybe because the wars we're fighting now still need people like her, he said finally. People who remember what it used to cost. He folded the file shut. And maybe, he added quietly, we forgot that cost. Outside, the desert night stretched infinite and cold. Walked alone along the perimeter wall. The moon was pale, almost colorless, and the silence of the open land pressed in like an ocean. Beyond the wire, the foothills slept under a blanket of ghost light, the same terrain that had almost swallowed Viper Team whole. She stopped near the base tower, the same one she'd climbed during the battle. Her hand brushed the cold metal of the ladder. She stared upward for a moment, then began to climb again. The higher she rose, the quieter the world became. At the top, she set down her rifle case and leaned against the rail, looking out over the wasteland. The wind tugged at her hair. Somewhere below, a generator coughed and went silent. For the first time in days, she exhaled. The breath came out shaky, colder than she expected. In the solitude, the calm broke just a little. Her hand trembled once before she forced it still. In her pocket was a small, worn leather notebook. She opened it carefully, the pages yellowed from years of use. Each page contained a name, some dates, no ranks, no explanations, just names. She turned to a blank page, wrote one more. Corporal David Chin. She stared at the ink until it dried. Then she closed the book and slipped it back into her pocket. The act was private, but its weight was infinite. It wasn't record-keeping. It was atonement. Every mission had a cost. Every saved life carried a shadow. She didn't celebrate victories, she memorized the dead, so they wouldn't be forgotten by a world too eager to move on. She whispered into the wind, "Your name won't fade." The next morning she was already awake before dawn. The base stirred slowly, boots crunching gravel, the smell of instant coffee thick in the air. The men noticed her again, standing near the tower, eyes fixed eastward where the first light began to crawl over the mountains. Watch from a distance. So did neither spoke. They just stood there side by side, uncertain what they were witnessing or what it meant. Finally broke the silence. "She keeps a book," he murmured. "How do you know?" asked. "I saw it. When she thought no one was looking, she wrote a name." He paused, his voice softer now. "Chin's name." Said nothing, his throat tightened. That was when it hit him, the quiet enormity of her ritual. She didn't carry medals, didn't tell stories. She carried names, the burden of memory. The realization was almost unbearable. "How do you live like that?" he whispered. Shook his head. "You don't. You just keep going until the ghosts stop counting." Later that day, a chopper descended into the dust, bringing supplies and a few replacement soldiers, fresh faces, still bright-eyed, still full of jokes. They hadn't heard the whispers yet. They didn't know who she was. They saw her walking past and made the same mistake the others had. One of them, a tall, loud kid from Texas, elbowed his buddy. "Who's grandma with the rifle case?" The men laughed. The old crew's team didn't. Their faces went still. They didn't even look up. The Texan noticed. "What? I say something funny." His voice came low, heavy, final. Don't what?" Met his eyes. "Don't talk about her like that, ever." The younger man hesitated, confused by the sudden weight in the room. Looked up from his tray, his tone like iron. "You see her, you show respect. You're breathing because she decided you could." The new recruits exchanged uneasy glances. The laughter died instantly. That was how myths were protected. Not by books, not by records, but by silence enforced through reverence. That was how legends lived. That night found her again, not to speak, but to stand nearby. She was outside the wire this time, kneeling beside a cluster of stones that had once marked an old observation post. The wind picked up small eddies of sand, swirling around her like restless spirits. He didn't interrupt, he just stood there watching. After a while she spoke, not to him but to the ground. "Do you know what the hardest part of getting older is, Sergeant?" she asked. He hesitated. "Ma'am." "It's realizing your wars never end. They just change shape." Her tone wasn't bitter. It was quiet, almost gentle. "Every new fight looks different. New uniforms, new weapons, but underneath same fear, same mistakes, same boys trying to prove they're not afraid of dying. She looked up at him, eyes reflecting the starlight. They always think courage is loud. He swallowed hard, and it's not. No, she said softly. Courage whispers, it moves slowly, it doesn't need to be seen. She rose, brushing sand from her knees. Good night, Sergeant. He wanted to say something more, something about gratitude or forgiveness, but the words wouldn't form. He just nodded, watching her walk away into the dark. Her silhouette faded into the camp lights, then into shadow. The desert wind filled the space she left behind, carrying her words like echoes through the endless night. In the distance, thunder rolled over the mountains, faint, hollow, maybe just artillery in another valley. The men of Kestrel turned in their bunks, restless, listening, but did not sleep. She sat on the edge of her bunk, eyes open, listening to the base breathe. Every sound, every silence understood. Outside, her rifle leaned against the wall, cleaned and ready. The tattoo on her forearm caught a sliver of moonlight, the coiled viper glinting faintly, half faded, but never gone. The legend lived quietly. The woman carried its weight alone. And somewhere beneath all the noise, the desert whispered her name again. Ghost Viper. Why do some wars never end, even when the guns fall silent? The following week, the desert turned cruel again. The days were white fire, the nights black ice. The wind carried dust that burned the eyes and crept into every crevice of the base. Men slept in half cycles, their dreams full of noise and motion. Even in rest, the war refused to release them. And yet, for a moment, Kestrel seemed stable. The memory of the ambush had settled into legend. The laughter hadn't returned, but the rhythm of life had resumed. The base repaired its broken drones, patched bullet holes in the walls, and wrote new rosters. But under the surface, tension waited patient as a snake. It started with static. Late one night, in the comms tent, Sergeant Vance frowned at his monitors. A faint distortion was pulsing across the northern perimeter frequencies. Nothing overt, just a soft interference that came and went, like a breath. He ran diagnostics. Clean. He adjusted gain. Still there. A whisper on the line. He looked toward the darkened annex where slept, or pretended to. A cold thought crept up his spine. He keyed his radio. Colonel, I think we have a ghost signal. His voice came back groggy but sharp. Source. Unknown, sir. It's mimicking our encryption pattern. Someone's probing our outer relay nets. Within minutes, the command tent lights flickered to life. Leaned over the map table, the red illumination painting hard lines on his face. Stood beside him, expression alert, professional, but beneath it, unease. He didn't say it out loud, but they were all thinking the same thing. The architect hadn't been finished. Arrived before anyone called her. She stepped into the tent, calm as ever, the faint hum of the generators echoing behind her. Her presence drew eyes instantly, not from curiosity anymore, but instinct. When she spoke, even the colonel listened. What's the pattern look like? She asked. Vance turned the monitor toward her. It's a narrowband intrusion, ma'am. Frequency drift every 4 seconds. Whoever's doing it knows our comm ladder. They're staying just under our alert threshold. Her eyes scanned the data. They're not testing our defenses, she said softly. They're mapping our habits. Meaning? Asked. Meaning, she said. They're planning another strike, and they want to know how long it takes us to notice. Silence. Then nodded once grimly. We tighten comms discipline, double perimeter patrols, no chatter off primary. If they're watching, we'll show them nothing. Yes, sir, said, already moving. Followed, but not before glancing back at. Her gaze was distant, not worried exactly, but weary, like someone hearing an old song they'd hoped to forget. That night, she didn't return to her bunk. Instead, she stood on the outer wall, eyes fixed on the northern horizon. The stars were sharp pinpricks against the black. The world looked peaceful, deceptively so, but her mind wasn't seeing now. It was seeing then. Years ago, another desert, another ambush, another team that never came home. She remembered the sound, not of the gunfire, but of the after. The ringing silence, the half-words on broken radios, the way command had refused to believe her warnings until it was too late. She remembered holding a satcom just like the one in Kestrel, screaming through static for help that never came. That was the day Ghost Viper died, officially, and was born quietly, with nothing left to lose but purpose. Now, decades later, the patterns were repeating. She closed her eyes. The desert wind pulled at her sleeves, exposing the faint coil of the Viper tattoo on her arm. Some ghosts don't haunt places. They haunt patterns. At 300, the first alarm came. The outer motion sensors on the north ridge tripped simultaneously, too clean, too coordinated. His voice crackled through the base PA. All units possible contact. North wall, movement beyond range 500. Night vision teams to the line. The base came alive instantly, boots slamming dirt, rifles snapping into hands, lights cutting through the dark. The hum of helicopters spun to life in the background. Was already moving. No helmet, no rush. Just that quiet walk that always seemed to get her there first. On the northern wall, and were scanning the horizon through thermal optics. Nothing said, no bodies, no heat signatures. Lowered his scope, false trigger. Negative, Vance's voice came through the comms. Multiple trip points, something out there, small, fast. Arrived beside them. It's not people, she said softly. It's sensors, disposable scouts. They're mapping our response time. Looked at her, you sure? I've seen it before. They'll test our perimeter twice. Then they'll hit us where we're blind. Where that? His voice came through. She turned her eyes toward the western ridge. There, she said, we moved the old water tank last week. The sensors haven't recalibrated. There's a gap in our coverage. Didn't hesitate, I'll take a team. But she shook her head. You won't get there in time. The first rocket hit 10 minutes later. It wasn't a full assault, just one strike, precise and surgical. It hit the supply compound at the western edge, sending fire into the sky. The blast knocked men off their feet, ripped open the thin metal walls, and scattered debris like shrapnel from the earth itself. Shouted into his mic, base hit, western sector compromised. Sirens wailed, barked orders. QRF to sector west, all medics on standby. In the chaos, didn't shout. She didn't even move fast. She walked through the smoke and noise with terrifying calm, directing panicked soldiers with single gestures, a pointed hand, a nod, a word. Keep your distance from the fire. Ammo crates are cooking. You water line now. Her voice cut through the roar like a knife. People listened because it was easier than thinking. She found in the smoke, trying to pull a wounded man from the debris. Together, they dragged him clear as the flames licked higher. He looked at her through the haze. How did you know? Her eyes didn't leave the burning compound. Because I've seen the same mistake before. Same mistake. She met his gaze, her voice low. Believing a war ends when you stop fighting. By dawn, the fire was out. 4 men wounded, 1 dead. The enemy gone, invisible again. But they'd left a message. A single steel casing lodged in the dirt outside the blast zone. A symbol etched into its side, a serpent biting its own tail. Recognized it instantly. It wasn't random, it was personal. She turned the shell over in her hand, the sunlight glinting off its surface. Approached, his face drawn, exhausted. You know that mark? Yes, she said quietly. I trained the man who uses it. Froze. Trained. She nodded once. Long ago, different flag, same lies. The words carried no pride, only fatigue. He didn't press further. Somehow, he knew this wasn't a story told easily. Later that day, called her into his office. "Who is he?" he asked without preamble. She didn't sit. "His name is, he was one of ours or close enough, field tech, signal warfare specialist, brilliant, unstable. He studied everything I knew about electronic countermeasures. Then he disappeared." "The architect." She nodded. "He's your architect." Leaned forward, rubbing his temples. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," she said evenly, "and because knowing wouldn't have changed what was coming." He wanted to argue, but the exhaustion stopped him. He looked at her, not as a subordinate anymore, but as the last person who truly understood what they were up against. "So what now?" he asked. Took a slow breath. "Now we wait for him to make another move, and when he does," she hesitated, her voice lowering to a whisper, "we end it for good this time." That night found her outside again, standing at the same tower she once saved them from. The wind was soft now, carrying the scent of burnt metal and fuel. He walked up beside her quietly. "I heard about him," said, "the architect, the one you trained." Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "Then you know enough." "I don't," he said. "Not really. You could killed him before. Why didn't you?" She was silent for a long time before she answered. "Because once I thought I could save him." Frowned. "Save him?" "He wasn't a monster when I met him," she said. "Just a soldier who'd seen too much. He believed he could control chaos by mastering it. The first step was always noble. The second never is." Her voice softened, almost breaking. "He was my student, Lieutenant, my responsibility. Every life he's taken since then I count." Didn't know what to say. The truth hit him harder than he expected, the realization that even legends carry failures like scars under the skin. She turned to him then, her eyes pale and unguarded. "Do you understand now why I don't wear medals?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly, "I do." Long after he left, remained at the tower, watching the horizon fade into violet dusk. The burn pit still glowed faintly from the earlier fire, small embers rising like lost souls. She reached into her pocket, took out her notebook, and wrote another name beneath the rest. Private Eli Morin. She pressed her hand against the page, closing her eyes. The ink smeared slightly under her fingertips. She whispered to the empty air, "One more debt." Then she tore the page from the notebook and folded it once, placing it inside the empty shell casing she'd found. She set it on the railing beside her, a silent offering to a war that refused to die. As the desert swallowed the last light, she spoke to the dark, her voice barely more than breath. "Wars don't end when we win. They end when we stop pretending they can be forgiven." The wind carried the words away. And far beyond the mountains, unseen in the distance, another signal stirred, faint, methodical, patient. The architect was listening. How do you fight an enemy who knows your every heartbeat? Because you taught him to listen for it. The desert was quiet again, but no one at Kestrel trusted quiet anymore. It had become the sound before things broke. 3 days had passed since the rocket strike. The engineers patched walls, replaced burnt wiring, and pretended the base was whole. But the men moved differently now, shorter conversations, sharper glances at the sky. Even laughter came out cautious, as if the air itself might record it. Inside the comms tent, Sergeant Vance hunched over his screens. His headphones hissed with faint distortion. He'd been hearing it all morning, a low pulse like a heartbeat buried in static. He checked the equipment twice, perfect. Checked the frequencies, clear, but the pulse remained, deliberate, waiting. He keyed his mic. "Colonel, we've got background modulation again. Might be a bounce from the western ridge." His reply was immediate. "Copy, keep it locked, don't engage yet." But was already there. She appeared behind Vance so silently, that he jumped when she spoke. "It's not a bounce," she said. "It's a handshake." Vance blinked. "A what?" "Is saying hello." The colonel entered a moment later, eyes narrowing. "You're sure it's him?" She nodded once. "He's embedding data in our telemetry beacons. He's inside the network but not triggering alarms. He's showing us he can." Exhaled through his teeth. "Psychological warfare." "Exactly," she said. "He wants fear to do the work for him." By evening, everyone felt the unease. Little things began to go wrong. Power flickers, motion sensors tripping on empty ground, a loudspeaker crackling with phantom words before cutting out. Doubled the watch rotations, slept in his gear. The men whispered about ghosts again, real ones this time. Then the first message arrived. A burst of static on every channel, followed by a single voice, male, calm, and horribly familiar too. "You taught me that silence wins, mentor. Let's see who keeps theirs longer." The words played once, then vanished. The bass froze. Men looked at each other, uncertain whether to be afraid or insulted. Slammed his headset down. "Is he inside our system?" "Yes," said softly, "and he wants us to know it." Colonel gathered the senior staff in the operations tent. Maps covered the tables again, but this time the enemy wasn't on them. He was in their wires, their walls, their heads. "Looked at, you trained him. How do we beat him?" She studied the map as if it were a memory. "You don't chase him with signals. You starve him of them. He thrives on noise, on patterns. We cut every outgoing frequency, go dark, cold. No drones, no pings, no digital footprints." Frowned. "That'll blind us too." "Then we learn to see differently," she said. "He's counting on us to panic and respond, so we don't." Nodded slowly. "All right, we ghost the base. Total radio silence for 48 hours. If he can't find movement, he'll have to come closer." The decision hit like a stone dropped into a still pond. No one argued. Everyone knew she was right, and everyone hated it. The next night, Kestrel became a tomb. No radios, no lights above waist level. Even the hum of generators was dampened with improvised mufflers. The soldiers spoke only in whispers or hand signals. Out beyond the wire, the desert swallowed the sound. Inside that suffocating quiet, fear became something physical, like static under the skin. Sat at his post, eyes sweeping the darkness through night vision lenses. The green glow painted the world in ghosts. Every flicker of wind-blown dust looked like a moving man. He tried not to think, tried not to remember. Behind him, a soft voice broke the stillness. "You're breathing too fast," said. He turned, startled. She was there again, as if she'd materialized from the dark itself, her rifle cradled loosely in her arms. "I didn't hear you approach," he murmured. "That's the point." Her tone carried no humor. She scanned the horizon beside him, calm and steady. "Fear makes us louder. Breathe slower, you'll hear more." They stood together for a long while listening. Wind, distant sand, nothing else. Finally, asked the question that had been festering in him since the attack. "Why do you still fight, ma'am? You could left this behind years ago." Her eyes stayed forward. "Because I owe debts to the living and the dead." He swallowed, "And when they're paid." She smiled faintly sadly. "They never are." Just before dawn, the silence broke. A flare arced over the ridge, green, deliberate, not theirs. Every soldier on the wall raised his weapon. The radio discipline held for 3 eternal seconds, until his voice cracked through, urgent. "Contact, multiple heat signatures, northeast ridge closing fast." Snapped to life. "All teams engage only on visual confirmation. Keep the comms short." The desert erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the dark in strobes. The attackers were invisible at first, then shapes emerged through the dust, moving in coordinated patterns. Too clean for local fighters. Too fast. "Not insurgents," growled. "These are trained." fired into the darkness, saw two drop, another rise in their place. For every shadow they hit, two more appeared. And over the chaos, a new voice crackled through their earpieces, the same calm tone as before. You taught me patience, Ghost. Now I'll teach you regret. Then the power cut. Total blackout. Every light, every monitor, every comms relay dead. The only illumination left was fire and tracer rounds. The night became primal. Moved instantly. Manual defense grid, she shouted, and for the first time since arriving at Kestrel her voice carried command, not suggestion, authority. Men obeyed without question. She pulled Vance toward the backup generator housing, forcing open the panel. You remember the analog line I made you keep? Yes, old field wire. Run it to the mortar pit. We're going to aim blind. He hesitated. How without coordinates? She looked toward the horizon, eyes narrowed. By memory. Minutes later she was on the tower again. The same one where she'd saved them before, now half-lit by explosions. Bullets hissed past, sparking off metal. She ignored them. Her scope swept the darkness, searching not for men but for rhythm. The attackers' muzzle flashes came in measured intervals. She counted silently, marking distance and spread. Then she keyed the field phone, one of the only devices still working through her improvised line. Mortar fire pattern Delta 40, 3-second spread, on my mark. A pause. Ma'am, that's inside minimum safe distance. Mark. The mortars fired. The ground shuddered. The ridge exploded in cascading bursts of light and dust. When the smoke cleared, half the assault line was gone. His voice broke through faintly on the emergency band, crackling with static. Direct hit. They're falling back. Repeat. Enemy retreating. The cheer that rose across the base wasn't loud. Just a shared exhale, disbelief turning slowly into relief. But didn't celebrate. She stayed at her scope, scanning the retreating figures, and then she saw him. A single silhouette on the far ridge, not running, watching. He lifted his hand in a slow, deliberate salute, then disappeared into the dust. The architect. Her jaw tightened. She whispered to the wind, almost to herself. You always did like theatrics. By sunrise, the base was a ruin again. Smoke curled upward in thin gray ribbons. The medics moved among the wounded. 8 injured, 2 dead. Better than it could have been. Worse than it should have been. Approached her at the tower's base. His face was streaked with soot, his voice raw. You turned the tide again. Without comms, without power, how the hell did you? She cut him off gently. Instinct, and remembering what I taught him. He frowned. Taught him. She nodded toward the distant ridge. He'll come back. That wasn't an assault, that was a rehearsal. Join them, fatigue etched deep in his face. Then we prepare for the encore. Shook her head. No, Colonel, you can't defend against a ghost, you hunt it. Her words hung in the morning air like prophecy. That afternoon the base gathered its dead. 2 bodies draped in flags carried silently toward the airstrip. The ceremony was brief. The desert didn't allow long goodbyes. When it ended, stayed behind, standing by the makeshift memorial wall. Her expression unreadable. Only her hand moved, opening the small leather notebook again. She wrote 2 more names, then closed it. No tears, no prayer, just that quiet act of witness. Approached slowly, unsure whether to speak. She sensed him anyway. Don't, she said softly, let silence do the talking. He nodded, stepped back, and did exactly that. As night fell, found her on the runway, staring toward the mountains. You were right, he said. He wanted us rattled, and it's working. He's not finished yet, she replied. He'll use the next strike to draw me out. That's how he works, emotion first, strategy second. And will you go? She looked at him, eyes calm, distant. Yes. Hesitated. If you leave the base, we lose our best defense. No, Colonel, she said quietly. If I stay, you'll lose everything else. He doesn't care about Kestrel. He cares about me. He wants his teacher to see what she created. He opened his mouth to argue, but there was something in her tone that silenced him. Not authority, finality. "Let me end what I began," she said. That night she returned to her bunk for the first time in days. She disassembled her rifle piece by piece, cleaning it with slow precision. Each click and scrape echoed like a heartbeat. When she finished, she sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the faint hum of the desert wind outside. Then she whispered, almost a prayer, almost a promise. "I'll find you one last lesson." She closed her eyes. And in the distance, unseen beyond the horizon, a faint signal pulsed twice, like a heartbeat answering hers. Why do some ghosts go hunting instead of waiting to be found? The dawn after the assault was pale and brittle, a sky bleached white by exhaustion. Kestrel's airstrip still smelled of burned fuel and iron. The wounded slept beneath IV lines that swayed in the wind. No one spoke much. Words had become a currency too costly to spend. At the edge of the compound moved with quiet purpose. She wore the same faded fatigues, a scarf around her throat and the old rifle case slung across her back. She wasn't rushing. She never rushed. She simply packed a small satcom, 2 canteens, a map that had seen 3 wars, and the notebook that never left her pocket. Every motion carried the stillness of a decision already made. When Colonel found her, she was tightening the strap on her pack. "You're really doing this," he said. "Yes." "You know what command will say." "I've stopped listening to what command says." Her tone was calm, not defiant, merely factual. He looked at her for a long time. "You walk out that gate, you're alone." "I've been alone since the day Gray Valley ended, Colonel." She met his eyes, softening a fraction. "But I won't leave you blind. The architect won't strike here again until I'm gone. He wants me, not Kestrel." His jaw worked, the words he wanted to say tangled with the ones he couldn't. Finally, he stepped aside. "You bring him home, one way or another." Gave the smallest nod and started walking toward the wire. The desert swallowed her quickly. No convoy, no escort, just a single figure moving through heat, shimmer, and silence. Her footprints faded almost instantly behind her. The radio in her pocket stayed off. She navigated by memory, by the way the light changed on the stones. Every ridge held the ghosts of old battles. Every gust of wind whispered names from her notebook. She didn't hurry. The architect was patient, and patience had been his first lesson. As she walked, fragments of the past rose and fell like mirages. A younger version of herself in a windowless training room. A man beside her, dark hair, steady hands, eyes that burned with questions. Field signal specialist. He'd been brilliant, brilliant and angry. Angry at the waste, at the politics, at the way wars were fought by people who never bled. She'd seen potential. She'd seen herself once. So she'd trained him. And somewhere between lesson and obsession, he'd crossed a line she hadn't noticed until it was too late. "Control the signal, control the story," he used to say. And then he started writing his own. Now he was out here, rewriting hers. Back at Kestrel, paced the command tent like a caged animal. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when he stormed into his office. "You let her go." "She didn't ask permission." "That's suicide, sir." "Maybe," said, "or maybe it's the only reason we're still breathing." Slammed his palms on the table. "We can't just sit here, we owe her." Leaning in the doorway, spoke quietly. "She doesn't want us to follow." "She also didn't want us to die on that ridge," shot back. "And she saved us anyway. I'm not letting her walk into hell alone." His eyes met. The colonel sighed, defeated. "You've got 24 hours. You go, you keep it small, 2 men, 1 drone, minimal comms. If she catches you, you deal with the fallout yourself." Nodded once, understood. Grabbed his gear, "Then let's move." The desert stretched ahead of them, endless and cruel. The small recon rover groaned over broken rock as the heat shimmered like water. They followed faint tracks, barely impressions in the dust. Drove, manned the optical scanner, scanning for any trace of movement. Crazy thing is, muttered, she doesn't even need maps, she feels this place. Squinted through the glare, she doesn't feel it, she's part of it. He wasn't wrong. 2 hours later they found the remains of her first camp, ashes from a small fire, a half-eaten ration pack, footprints leading east, nothing else. She'd covered her trail perfectly. It wasn't evasion, it was discipline. Sir said, pointing to the horizon. Thermal blip, 10 clicks ahead, maybe 12, not her, too big. Steadied the binoculars. Convoy technicals, maybe 3-4 trucks. He lowered the glasses. She's heading straight into them. Reached the ridge by midday. The light was merciless, the world reduced to glare and shadow. Below her, the convoy crawled through the wadi, a line of armed pickups with mounted guns. She recognized the formation immediately. Efficient, disciplined, Western-trained. His men. She unpacked her rifle with practiced ease. The metal was hot, almost burning against her skin. She lay prone, sighting through the scope, breath steady. One squeeze could stop the lead truck. Another could end it. But she didn't fire. Not yet. She watched instead, studying patterns, counting rhythms. She saw it then, a small antenna protruding from the last truck, painted black, oscillating faintly in the heat. A transmitter. Handwriting. He was broadcasting from the convoy itself, which meant he wanted her to find him. She almost smiled. Of course you do, you arrogant bastard. She turned the rifle away, unslung the SATCOM, and keyed a single line of text into the dormant transmitter she'd modified back at Kestrel. Stop hiding behind echoes. If you want me, come get me. Then she shut it off. Far behind her, Rover jolted over a ridge. The horizon flickered with smoke. Contact, said, peering through the magnifier. Looks like a convoy's been hit. Floored the accelerator. When they arrived, the trucks were burning wrecks. Bodies scattered, weapons half buried in sand. The air stank of diesel and metal. Whatever happened, it had been fast, surgical. Crouched beside one of the fallen. The man's neck bore a tattoo of a serpent biting its tail, kicked at the sand. Same mark as the casing at Kestrel. She was here, said. He pointed to the ground, and she's still ahead. Stared at the wreckage. If she did this alone. Cut him off, then she's not slowing down. They followed. Night fell like ink spilling across the horizon. The desert cooled, the air thin and sharp. Moved under the stars, guided by faint light and older instincts. She hadn't eaten in a day. It didn't matter. Her mind was fixed on the signal beacon she'd triangulated from the convoy, stronger now, closer. Every few miles she stopped and listened. To the static, to the silence, to the faint pulse hidden inside it. It was almost like hearing a heartbeat through the sand. His heartbeat. Finally she reached a ravine. A scar in the earth carved by centuries of forgotten rivers. Down in its depths glowed a small camp, a handful of tents, a generator, and a long-range antenna stabbing up at the stars. A new nest. She crouched among the rocks, watching. 3 guards moved lazily near the fire, weapons slung low. The generator sputtered, one of them cursed and kicked it. Another laughed. They had no idea she was there. She took a breath. The desert seemed to hold it with her. Then she moved. The first guard dropped without sound. The second turned, confused, just in time to see the reflection of her eyes before the butt of her rifle silenced him. The third barely reached for his radio before she swept it away and pressed the muzzle to his temple. "Where is he?" she asked. The man stammered, terrified. "Gone North Ridge meeting, please." She lowered the weapon slightly. "You're lying." He swallowed. "He said you'd come." Her eyes hardened. "Then he's right." She pressed the trigger once. The sound vanished into the wind. And arrived an hour later. They found the camp smoldering, the antenna half melted, crouched beside the bodies, scanning the dirt for tracks. "She's close," he murmured. "She's moving north." looked around uneasy. This isn't a chase anymore, sir. This is a reckoning. Glanced at the horizon. Then we better be there when it happens. At dawn, reached the edge of an abandoned mining complex, rusted towers, collapsed tunnels, a graveyard of iron and sand. The signal was strongest here. She could feel it in the bones of the place, the faint vibration underfoot. She entered the ruins slowly, rifle ready. Her footsteps echoed against steel. The sunlight filtered through holes in the roof, scattering like broken glass. Then she heard him. Still moving like a shadow, I see. His voice carried from the darkness, older now, deeper, but unmistakable. She didn't turn, and you still talk too much. A chuckle echoed. You taught me to fill silence with purpose. She stepped forward, eyes adjusting. Stood amid the shadows of the machinery, unarmed, hands loose at his sides. His face was leaner, harder. The same intelligence burned in his eyes, but behind it something else. Madness tempered by clarity. I wanted you to see what you left behind, he said. You built me. No, she said softly. I built a soldier, you built this. He tilted his head. You can't build weapons and then curse them for firing. They circled each other slowly, two ghosts orbiting the same sin. You killed your own men, she said. For what? Revenge, validation. For proof, he said simply, that the world still bleeds when it's cut. You taught me precision. I only removed mercy from the equation. Her hand tightened on the rifle. Then this ends here. Agreed, he said, but not yet. You brought company. She froze, a distant sound, engines, and rover. Smiled faintly. I counted on it. Turned toward the entrance, saw dust rising in the distance. You'll use them to bait me. He stepped closer, voice soft. No, I'll use them to remind you that attachment is your flaw. Her answer was quiet, and yours was thinking I ever stopped caring. Then she moved. The rifle came up, the safety clicked off, and the air cracked once, just once. The bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him backward into the dark. He didn't cry out, just laughed low, rasping, still alive. Always the teacher, he whispered, disappearing into the shadows of the mine. She advanced cautiously, weapon up, every sense stretched thin. Outside, N's vehicle screeched to a halt. The first echoes of gunfire reached them. Contact, shouted, she's in there. Grabbed his rifle, then we go. The desert wind rose, carrying sand like smoke over the mouth of the mine. And somewhere within that labyrinth of metal and memory, two ghosts closed in on each other, the past and the present colliding in silence and fire. What happens when the ghost finally meets the one it created? The mine swallowed light. Every step took sent echoes running down metal corridors, vanishing into the deep. The air was thick with rust and dust, the scent of long-dead industry. Somewhere in the black, a generator hummed, faint but steady. The architect was still alive. Her boot brushed a spent shell casing, one of hers, years old, stamped with the same serpent sigil he'd stolen. She knelt, fingertips tracing its grooves, a relic of the first time she'd taught him to shoot. The first time she'd believed in him. Now, that memory felt like a scar carved into her ribs. Outside, the wind screamed over the sand. And crouched behind the broken conveyor towers, scanning the entrance through binoculars. Movement, whispered. She's in. Signals intermittent. No thermal inside. Place is a maze. Exhaled. She's walking into a trap. He checked his weapon. We're going in. Grabbed his arm. Sir, you sure she'll want backup? Looked toward the dark mouth of the mine. No, that's why we're not asking. They entered. Inside, the sound of dripping water mixed with static, faint, pulsing, almost like a whisper in the walls. The architect had wired the tunnels with old communication nodes, looping signal through rusted speakers. It wasn't random. It was taunting. As moved deeper, the voices began. You once said, every signal has intent. What's yours now, mentor? She froze, rifle up. The voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. You taught me precision, you taught me patience, but you never taught me what to do with silence. Her jaw tightened, because silence is supposed to teach you. Another chuckle crackled through the comms. I learned silence is a weapon. Then the generator died. The mine plunged into black. Only the faint phosphorescent strip on her rifle glowed. She moved by instinct, counting steps, tracing the walls with her free hand. She could hear him now, not through speakers but in the air. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, closing distance. He spoke softly, almost gently. You think this is about vengeance, but it's not, it's about truth. What truth? She asked, voice steady. That we build killers, then pretend to be surprised when they kill. You shaped me into this. I'm just the result of perfect training. No, she said quietly. You're the result of forgetting why we fight. He laughed, the sound echoing like broken glass. Why? For medals, for lies on folded flags. I fight because fighting is honest. And moved through the outer tunnels, flashlights cutting thin beams through the dark. Jesus whispered, this place feels alive. Checked his compass, useless. The magnetic interference was too strong. He keyed his radio. Kestrel command this is, we're inside the mine following Ghost Viper's trail. Possible hostile presence. Do you copy? Nothing, just static. He lowered the mic, dead air. His beam caught something on the wall, a painted symbol, half faded but recognizable, the serpent biting its tail. Beneath it, words stenciled in Arabic script. His translator HUD flickered, one word resolved. Rebirth. Deeper inside, found the source of the signal. A table, jury-rigged with wires, batteries, and a cracked monitor. On it, a photograph, old, grainy, black and white. Her and years ago, smiling, proud. She felt her chest tighten. The monitor flickered to life. His face appeared, not live, recorded. If you're watching this, it means you finally followed me. I always knew you would. You never could resist finishing a mission. His tone was soft, almost mournful. You taught me that every ghost has a reason it doesn't rest. I wanted you to know mine. The feed cut, behind her footsteps. He was there in the half-light. Alive, arm bandaged from her bullet, eyes hollowed by obsession but burning with something painfully familiar, purpose. Why the games? She asked. Because truth needs, he said. If I'd killed you outright, they'd call me a monster, but if you kill me now, they'll call you one. Her rifle stayed trained on him. You think I care about stories? You used to, he said softly. You built one, Ghost Viper, the invisible myth. You wore silence like armor until even your own people doubted you were real. His voice darkened. Now they'll watch the legend die. He moved fast, faster than she remembered. The rifle cracked once, the round sparking off metal. She pivoted, dropped, fired again. He vanished behind a pillar, laughing through pain. You can't kill an idea. Neither can you, she said, and heard the shots echo down the shaft. Left tunnel, shouted. They sprinted, the echoes chasing them like thunder. They emerged into the chamber just as another burst of gunfire lit the dark. Sparks danced across the metal floor. They saw movement, two figures locked in shadow and dust. Yelled, drop it. For an instant the light caught both faces, teacher and student, and he understood. This wasn't a duel, it was a confession. Fired first. The round grazed her arm, tore fabric and skin. She didn't flinch. She advanced, deliberate, each step echoing like a verdict. You think this ends with me, she said, but it ends with the idea you corrupted. He tried to raise his weapon again, but she was already there, close enough to disarm him with a twist that broke his wrist. The gun clattered away. They struggled in silence, strength against memory. Say it, he hissed. Say you made me. She shoved him back against the wall. Her voice was low, shaking with anger and sorrow. I made a soldier, you made a ghost. He smiled through blood, then haunt me. She hesitated, just long enough for him to lunge. The knife flashed too close, instinct took over. A single shot, point blank. He fell. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The sound of the gunshot rolled through the tunnels and died. Then she sank to her knees beside him. He was still breathing faintly. His eyes found hers calm, almost peaceful now. "You taught me everything," he whispered, "even how to lose." She swallowed hard. "You never learned how to forgive." He smiled faintly. "Neither did you." Then he stopped breathing and reached her seconds later, froze at the sight, the weapon in her hand, the lifeless body at her feet, the expression on her face. She looked up at them. Her voice was quiet, stripped bare. "It's over." Approached cautiously. "You're bleeding." She looked down as if noticing for the first time. Just a scratch. Knelt beside's body, checking for any sign of life. Nothing. He exhaled. Who was he? Stared into the dark. My failure. They carried him out together, through the tunnels and into the rising sun. The desert stretched endless ahead, wind whispering through the old machinery. Watched her as they walked, her silence, her stillness, the weight she carried without letting it bend her. At the surface, rescue convoy waited, summoned by last flare before comms had died. Medics swarmed, soldiers gathered, eyes widening when they saw her. They whispered again, not in disbelief this time, in reverence. "Ghost Viper." She didn't acknowledge it, just walked past them, blood drying on her sleeve, eyes fixed on the horizon. That evening, as the sun bled into the dunes, she stood alone by the airstrip. A small body bag lay at her feet. The colonel approached quietly, holding a single tag. His identification said, "We'll mark him as enemy combatant, unless you want." "No," she said. "He was never the enemy, just lost." Studied her face. "You know what they'll say, that ghost viper killed her own." She nodded. "Let them say it. Legends die so truth can live." He hesitated. "And the truth? That we make what we fear and call it destiny." She turned away, walking toward the twilight. Later, when the camp slept, she opened her notebook again beneath a flickering lamp. The list of names filled every page now. At the bottom, she wrote one more. Yes. She closed the book and whispered to the dark. "You were right. Silence is a weapon, but not all weapons are meant to be used." The wind shifted through the tent flap, carrying sand and the faint hum of distant signal static. For the first time in years, she smiled, not from peace, but from understanding. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. How do you retire a ghost? The morning after the confrontation, the desert was still. Not peaceful, just empty, the kind of silence that comes when even the wind runs out of things to say. At Kestrel, the dawn light fell across twisted metal and the skeletons of old drones. The war hadn't left. It had only grown quiet enough for people to hear themselves breathe again. Stood at the perimeter wall, watching the sun climb. Her sleeve was bandaged, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, but her posture was the same as always, steady, unreadable. A cigarette burned between her fingers, smoke curling like thought. Behind her, footsteps approached softly. He didn't salute. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking out over the same horizon. "You're leaving," he said. She nodded once. "Where will you go?" "Where silence is still useful," she said quietly. "There are always places that need it." He didn't smile. "You could stay, you earned that." She turned to him. "I didn't earn rest, Lieutenant, just understanding." Word of what happened in the mine spread faster than orders. Command called it a successful neutralization of an insurgent network. The files were stamped, the reports filed, the medals discussed. But the soldiers at Kestrel, they told it differently. They told each other about the woman who'd walked into the dark alone, the one who faced the ghost she'd created and didn't flinch, the one who didn't speak of victory, only of endings. In the mess hall, sat with a fresh bandage on his cheek, staring at the wall where someone had pinned a new patch. A serpent coiled around a dagger, a symbol for the fallen. Beneath it, someone had written in marker, "Ghost Viper confirmed real." No one laughed this time. Outside, the colonel watched as a single unmarked helicopter touched down near the airstrip. Its rotors whipped dust across the tarmac, blurring edges, blurring faces. Approached slowly, her duffel slung over one shoulder, met her halfway. He tried to speak, but she stopped him with a small gesture. "Colonel," she said, "you did what many wouldn't, you trusted silence." He managed a faint smile, "And look where it got us." "Alive," she said, "that's enough." He hesitated. "You never told me what was the real Ghost Viper mission, the one command buried." She looked past him toward the horizon. It wasn't a mission. It was a mistake someone had to make twice to understand once. He didn't ask again. Some truths weren't meant to be carried by more than one person. The helicopter lifted slowly. Dust spiraled in small storms beneath it, then settled back into the earth, and watched until the aircraft was a dot swallowed by light. Broke the silence first. "Think we'll see her again?" Didn't answer immediately. He adjusted his cap, eyes still on the sky. "No," he said finally, "but we'll feel her when we need to." Frowned. "Feel her?" Half smiled. "Every time we stop talking and start thinking." 3 weeks later, the desert shifted again. The Kestrel base began its withdrawal. Orders came down, new command, new sectors. The war was moving elsewhere, but the people weren't the same. They'd seen something no report could explain. At night, when the power dimmed, soldiers still told the story. About the woman with the Viper tattoo, about how the enemy froze when they saw it, about how she never shouted, never ordered, never claimed a thing, she simply acted. And in the telling, they always lowered their voices, not from fear but from respect. Far away in a small border town forgotten by maps, rented a single room above an auto shop. The owner didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers. The walls were bare except for a small, tattered flag and a shelf with her notebook, now closed for good. Every morning she walked the edge of the dunes. No rifle, no uniform, just the horizon and the sound of her boots in the sand. She watched locals repair their wells, mend broken fences, rebuild things that war had stolen. No one knew who she was. She preferred it that way. Sometimes she heard distant echoes of gunfire, far enough to sound like thunder. The world kept fighting as it always had, but for the first time she didn't move toward the sound. She just listened. One evening, as the sun bled red into the sky, a small truck pulled into town. Climbed out, dust covering his uniform. He found her exactly where he expected, sitting by the edge of the old road, watching light fade. He didn't salute, just sat beside her. "Command asked me to find you," he said. "I didn't leave a trail." He shrugged, "Didn't need one." They sat in silence for a long moment, listening to the wind move through the dry grass. Finally he said, "They want you back. Strategic Training Division, Special Command Advisory." She smiled faintly. "They always want ghosts when they run out of soldiers." "You'll say no." "I'll say what I've always said, nothing." He laughed softly. "You ever get tired of being a mystery?" She looked at him. "Mystery keeps people honest. They imagine better stories when you stop correcting them." Night fell. The sky filled with stars, sharp, countless, impossible, glanced sideways at her profile against the light. "You never told me what it meant," he said quietly. "The tattoo." She rolled up her sleeve slowly, revealing the coiled viper inked into her forearm. The black had faded to gray with years, the edges blurred. "It's not for fear," she said. "It's for restraint." He frowned slightly. "Restraint?" She nodded. "A viper doesn't waste its venom. It strikes only when there's no other way. That's what Ghost Viper meant, not the killer they made up. The one who knew when not to kill." He watched her for a long time. So, you're done striking. She looked back toward the desert, the faintest smile ghosting her lips. No, I'm just learning when silence hurts more. Stayed the night sleeping in the small spare cot she kept by the door. When he woke before dawn, the room was empty. The window open, the air cold. On the table sat her notebook, a single page torn free and left beside it. He unfolded it carefully, a few words written in her neat, deliberate hand. We are not what we destroy. We are what we save, even from ourselves. Beneath it, her old insignia patch, the viper coiled in silence. He looked out the window, toward the dunes already catching light, and for a moment he thought he saw her, a lone figure walking into the horizon, disappearing in the shimmer. But he didn't call out, he just nodded once. Weeks passed. The notebook, now in his possession, traveled quietly from hand to hand, base to base. Each soldier who read a line wrote one of their own on the back pages. Messages, promises, lessons learned the hard way. By the time it reached command, it wasn't a record anymore. It was a conversation between those who fought and those who refused to stop trying to understand why. No one knew who started it. They only knew the name written on the inside cover. Captain Ghost Viper. In time, the world moved on. The reports faded, the conflicts shifted. But in quiet corners of the military, briefing rooms, firing ranges, forward outposts, her story lingered. Not in glory, in discipline. The story of the woman who carried her failures instead of hiding them. The one who never shouted for recognition, never waited for permission, and never explained herself, because she didn't need to. She had already done the one thing no war could erase. She remembered. Years later, a new recruit at a distant desert base found the same phrase etched into a stone near a memorial wall. The wind had worn the letters down, but the message endured. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And beneath it, a faint carving of viper, coiled and waiting. The desert wind rose again, carrying the sound of memory across endless sand. Somewhere out there, a woman walked beneath a burning sky, unarmed and unafraid, listening to the hum of a world she no longer needed to fight. The myth had ended. The soldier had faded. But the silence, her silence, remained. A silence that could stop a war. A silence that could teach.